Welcome back, everyone, to our deeper dive into the closer look into the Bible with a more, critical outlook. This is the second part of our mini series where we're looking at the birth story of Christ as told to us through the Bible, right? And if you guys haven't seen part one, make sure you check it out before you watch into this, so you're not missing out anything or no context that we're gonna speak about. But for those of you who have seen part one and remember that where we left off when we last spoke, it was Luke telling the prophecy of Jesus is coming. And we spoke about how much it differed from Matthew's prophecy of the angel rather than going to Mary and it goes to Joseph and Luke's prophecy, but it goes to Mary and John's prophecy. Matthew's prophecy and it go what you call it, the angels appear to Joseph while he's dreaming, but to Mary, she comes in, it comes to her regular, like broad daylight. And then we learn that, according to Matthew's telling, Joseph does want to divorce Mary, and that's ultimately why God sends an angel. But according to Luke, people should have known Mary was pregnant by God, and they did know. So him wanting to divorce Mary is makes no sense, and it's just there for show. And I think that speaks to what we was talking about in the last episode, where about Matthew and what Matthew, but I believe is whoever wrote Matthew, because I don't believe there's one person who wrote Matthew, but the people who wrote Matthew, they took a bunch of philosophies or prophecies, I'm sorry, that they heard of from before, and then they just added them all up to try to make Christ. So without me further, without me talking too much, let's get into the actual birth of Christ.
After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked,
"Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?"
We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him.
When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born.
"In Bethlehem in Judea,"
they replied.
"for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler, who will be the shepherd of my people Israel."
Then Herod called the Magi secretly, and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said,
"Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him."
After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route.
So Matthew's telling of the story of the birth of Christ starts off with what they refer to here as Magi, but you might more know them more commonly as wise men. One thing I'm gonna mention that a lot of people make this mistake when they retell this story of they say there's three of them. Nowhere here or anywhere else I've read does it mention a number of them. It just says Magi, which is the plural for the type of people that they are. It's just like you're saying there was multiple of them. We do not know how many of them, but because of the amount of gifts that were brought, that's why people say there were three, because they brought what is the gifts again? The gifts don't matter at this point, but you guys get the point. Right, so the story starts off with having these wise men or magi come from east of Jerusalem. So and they go to they go and ask, "Where's the King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." So, according to Matthew's telling, there is a star that, once the Messiah is born, that appears in the sky, in the north sky, that, these people, these wise men, they know, oh my God, this is the star of Christ. He has been born. Let us go and worship him. So they go, and the king at the time, King Herod, he hears this, and he's very afraid because he's the king. He don't want nobody else to be king. So the king calls them and asks them, where is this God, this Messiah, going to be born? And of course, these being wise men, they have all the answers. They say, in Bethlehem, in Judah, for that is what the prophet has written. And if you're paying attention, this is the second time Matthew has mentioned another prophecy, a prophecy. The last one was being that the child would be born of a virgin, and we already saw where that took us. So I was like, Matthew's mentioning another prophecy. So I kept that in the back of my head, and as I kept reading, and I was like, I'm going to refer back to that later. As we keep going, we see that Herod, he calls the wise men and finds out exactly when the star had appeared. And, he tells them, go ahead, go worship the king. And when you find him, tell me so I can come worship him too. So they go on the merry way and look for Mary. And upon finding him, they come up onto a house. Keep that is very key. They come upon a house, and they saw the child with his mother and bowed down and worshiped him. They opened their treasures. So remember, they are in a house when these wise men come to visit them, according to this telling by Matthew. And this is when he gives them the three gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Right? And now we get another angel coming in. And like I told you, to pay attention to how these angels come in the story. So, having been warned in a dream, again, these are the wise men now they're talking about. They return to their country by another route. So, angels are coming to people and only in their dreams and telling them, things to do from God. So, God told them that do not go back to Herod because he is trying to harm the baby and everything like that. So, before I continued, I was like, okay, let me see what prophecy that Matthew is referring to. So I, look it up, and I found out it's in Micah chapter 5, verse 2 and 3, right? So I decided, okay, let's go look at Micah, right? So a lot of people, they will just read it and they'll tell you, oh yeah, it says it right there. But what you need to understand about the Bible is the context, right? So what I like to think about is, when was this text written, who was it written for, and why was it written, right? So we'll talk about the book of Micah after we hear what he has to say.
Marshal your troops, O city of troops, for a siege is laid against us. They will strike Israel's ruler on the cheek with a rod. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Therefore Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor gives birth, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth, and he will be their peace. When the Assyrian invades our land and marches through our fortresses, we will raise against him 7 shepherds, even 8 leaders of men. They will rule the land of Assyria with a sword, the land of Nimrod with drawn sword. He will deliver us from the Assyrian when he invades our land and marches into our borders. The remnant of Jacob will be in the midst of many peoples, like dew from the Lord, like showers on the grass, which do not wait for man or linger for mankind. The remnant of Jacob will be among the nations, in the midst of many peoples, like a lion among the beasts of the forest, like a young lion among flocks of sheep, which mauls and mangles as it goes, and no one can rescue. Your hand will be lifted up in triumph over your enemies, and all your foes will be destroyed.
So, the book of Micah is one of these prophetic books that were written around the time when the first temple of Jerusalem was about to fall. So I don't really have time to go over like everything. Maybe I'm gonna talk about like the falling of the temples in a further down video, but it's not gonna be here today. Just a quick rundown of who Micah is and like these types of writings. So they're writing about these prophecies that God has sent them in the falling times when Israel is gonna be basically destroyed and overrun by these Assyrians, right? So Micah, being a prophet of God, in these earlier chapters, this is chapter 5. In the first 4 chapters, he's telling us everything he's hearing from God and like how God is telling him all these things are gonna come to pass. And he mentions the legendary Mount Zion. So I'll probably touch on that because they do mention Mount Zion a lot here, and that's something I see a lot, and like a lot of people have a lot of confusions about what that is. So maybe we'll touch upon that. But back to Micah's prophecy, talking about Bethlehem, right? Though you are small among clans, out of you will come for me a ruler for over all of Israel. Right, so Matthew, the people who wrote Matthew, they see this prophecy and they interpret it for Christ. But we with logic, if we just keep reading, we can see that this same prophecy, the same person that will come out of Bethlehem will save them and these against their coming enemies of the Assyrians. So this is not foretelling of a prophet to come and save all of mankind from their sins or whatever they claim that the reason why Jesus is here for. These prophecies are foretelling of people coming to save them at a very specific time in their lives where they need a lot of help, so they turn to these prophets to look for God. So the people who wrote Matthew, and you got to remember, in the times of Matthew, this is not what we have today where you can just go and fact check everything. No, everything was written, was word of mouth. So they heard all these prophecies. You grew up with hearing about all these prophecies, and this one day this guy comes out, I wrote all these prophecies down, and like they see 1, 2, 3, 4, they were leading up to this man, and here he is today, and boom, this is how we have Jesus Christ. And it's like, if all we have to do is just literally take a look at this thing that they're feeding us and ask them, what is it made of? And they will not be able to answer you truthfully, because honestly, they know the truth. They know what they're telling you is not the truth, because when I was doing my research about this birth story of Christ, like everywhere would mention Luke and Matthew, right? But they would never mention them together. They would either mention one or the other. Every website I went to at least 6 websites. One would mention Matthew or one would mention Luke, because they know mentioning them together is a contradiction, and that they will open the floodgates, so to speak. So they know what they're doing, and it's our job to see what they're doing, right? So now that we're speaking of Luke, let's get away from this prophecy, because our friend Luke doesn't really get into the prophecies. Let's see how he tells his story of the birth of Christ.
In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to his own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them,
"Do not be afraid. I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is Christ the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger."
Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying,
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to men on whom his favor rests.
When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another,
Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about.
So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them.
Okay, so that was Luke's telling, and that telling was something, because if you can see, a lot of these things that Matthew, proclaim happen according to prophecy, especially, the prophecy of him coming, the Lord coming out of Bethlehem and everything. So for that to even happen, they got pretty lucky, or it was a coincidence, or God made it so that, there would be a census that would force Joseph to get up from the town of Nazareth in Judea. Remember, so in Luke's telling, they are living in Galilee, in Nazareth and Galilee. So they got to get up and go to Bethlehem. And Matthew's telling, they already are in Bethlehem. That is why they have a house. Right? So according to this, so because they have to leave their house, they're traveling, and it just so happens, oh gosh darn, this is the day that my water broke. So, and they went to an inn, and they had no space for them, so they had to go to a manger. Right? That wasn't the prophecy at all. But it's while they're in the manger, one of the craziest things happened. If you can remember, Matthew, the very first thing Matthew told us about the birth is that Magi from the east came to worship him. Where are these Magi? Right? Jesus is being born, and now we're being told, no, it was shepherds that were in the field, who happened to be nearby in the field, and an angel came to them. And again, we have another angel. Is he coming to them in a dream? No, because it's multiple of them. He comes to a lot of them. And not only one angel, but a heavenly host appears with the angels. Right? So now we have multiple angels singing about the Christ being born. Right? So these shepherds, who are not wise men in this story, they run off to the manger and they find the baby Jesus there, and they worship him, and they go and they spread the news about him. Right? Which shouldn't make sense. If both of these are supposed to be true at the same time, that cannot happen. There is no way these shepherds will be allowed to go out and just, speak about the baby Jesus if King Herod is looking for him. Right? So we already started with these contradictions already, right? In just the birth telling alone. So how would somebody, what I would like to know, right? Because these are the stories that are telling us that are inherently the word of God. How I want somebody to be able to answer this. The reason I make these videos and stuff is because when I was in church, I never had a chance to be able to vocalize what I felt was wrong, or and ask questions, or whenever I would ask a question, I was just told to read my Bible, and I'm just not understanding, or I'm just I have a spirit of confusion, or I'm just I'm just not into it. I'm just no, it's because what you're telling me is not making sense. So hopefully, I have somebody watching who does know something that can clarify this, because this makes absolutely no sense. How can, it be that Luke is telling one story where it has them starting off already living in Nazareth and traveling to Bethlehem, and that's why they have to stay in a manger, because you wouldn't have to stay in a manger if you're already in your home city. you're just gonna you have a house. So the only reason that they are in this manger is because they have to travel to Bethlehem, but Matthew already has them living in Bethlehem. So they cannot be true together. So it's either one or it's true or they're both just lies, and we both know that they're both made up. So let's just continue seeing what Matthew says after, the wise men were told to leave in a dream. Thank you so much for making it this far into part 2. I really appreciate you for coming in and listening to just me talk about some of the things that, I'd noticed along my research of trying to, understand everything that I went through as a kid. So, if you're still around, thank you. I really appreciate it. If you haven't seen the first one, like I said, make sure you check it out. There is another part to this that will be coming out because, believe it or not, this story is still not over. We still have to resolve what happens, to baby Jesus, because according to Matthew, King Herod is on the hunt, but Luke makes no mention of this. So from Matthew's perspective, and you already know Matthew's the prophet of prophets, so he has some more prophecies we're gonna take a look into and see where does that go to. So if you have any other questions or biblical things that you've been going through, I was a pastor's kid for a while, so the Bible is one of these things that I do know a lot about, and unfortunately I'm trying to learn more about what I was taught. So if you have some questions or just leave them down in the comment. I'll see how we can get back into it, and I'll see you guys in another video, man. Out.